In studio, guest host Brian Wesbury, Chief Investment Strategist at Claymore Advisors. Crude below $60 a barrel for the first time in 3 months. Warm weather sapping demand for heating oil, but the debate over how much black gold exists continues to rage on. In Houston, Matt Simmons, CEO of Simmons & Company International, author of Twilight in the Desert, the coming Saudi oil shock of the world economy. He says the booming oil days are over. In San Diego, Craig Smith, CEO of Swiss America Trading, author of Black Gold Stranglehold. He says there's plenty of oil. We just have to dig deeper. All right, let's start with the Craig, the argument that there's plenty of gold, but we just have to dig deeper. Plenty of oil.
Well, Mark,
are you talking about finding new oil, or are you talking about improving the technology to recover more out of the fields?
Well, I think both, Mark. I mean, if you look at the Department of Energy's Energy Information Administration, we currently have 1.28 trillion barrels of proven reserves, which are the highest in our history. And if we are in fact depleting the giant oil wells, and how come the reserves are continuing to increase? I think with technology and new finds, especially off the continental shelves and in the Gulf, like the Thunder Horse rigs or the Atlantis project, I just don't buy the theory that we're running out of oil.
Matt Simmons, what do you say?
We're not running out of oil. The risk of running out of oil is minuscule, but the risk that we're peaking is a very real threat. And until we have better data, we can have a theological debate for the next 2 or 3 years. But what we really need to do is demand field-by-field quarterly production statistics, and then we can start actually looking at real numbers.
Will you concede that improvements in technology could delay the peak for quite some time?
No, I actually think that what we've done with technology has allowed oil to be pulled out of the ground at far faster rates. It's created decline curves that that weren't literally possible 10 or 15 years ago. It's also allowed the industry to do riskier projects, and the riskier projects sometimes don't work very well. There are 2 deep water projects in the Gulf of Mexico, for instance, Front Runner and Marco Polo, that basically within months of coming on stream, both watered up. Marco Polo is now down to 10% of what it was supposed to be at a year ago. So I think a lot of the technology actually made things harder to do, not easier.
But I think at the same token, you have to look at projects like Atlantis that are going to be online producing 150,000 barrels a day, and also Thunder Horse, which is a billion-barrel rig. I mean, I asked a simple question, Matt, of why would the oil companies be committing $55 billion to harvesting the Gulf if, in fact, there's not enough oil there? I mean, it just wouldn't make sense mathematically.
Well, the industry is struggling right now to try to maintain at best flat production, and so I think that if there's a project that can be done, they're going to tackle it. The problem is we just don't have the abundant inventory of projects to do that we had 10 years ago.
Mr. Smith, this is Brian Wesbury. Good morning.
Good morning.
You have an interesting theory that basically says oil is not decaying dinosaurs or at bends of rivers where leaves piled up and decayed. That basically oil is deep in the crust, that it comes out as the earth spins. Doesn't that mean that if I just dig deep enough, I'm going to find all the oil I want?
Well, in theory, that's correct, and I think that the Russians have proven this beyond any question. I mean, if you look at the Vyacheslav Petro project between Vietnam and Russia, they drilled right through crystalline basement and have found wells like White Tiger or Black Lion that are producing 280,000 barrels a day. Soon, Black Lion will be producing 200,000 barrels a day. I mean, clearly, we've got a lot of oil out there, and I think we need to embrace new technology to go get some of this oil.
Well, that's great. And Mr. Simmons, then let me come back to you. Hundreds of years ago, Thomas Malthus predicted that the population of the Earth would outgrow our ability to grow food. Clearly, technology made him dead wrong. It was just simply a horrible forecast. Isn't it the case that that's likely to happen here in the energy industry as well?
History will finally prove one way or the other, but I think the higher we actually have demand, the faster we're going to actually hit peak oil. And unfortunately, too many areas now are in irreversible decline. 10 years ago, most experts thought the North Sea wouldn't approach peak oil until 2010. And by 2000 would be producing about 7.5 million barrels a day. The reality is that it peaked in 1999 and is already off 35%. That's using every scrap of technology we know about.
But logicians, for years have talked about the fallacy of composition. Just because the Saudi oil fields may be depleting doesn't mean that the world's supply of oil is diminishing. And I think we're starting to prove that over and over again, whether it be in the Niger Delta or whether it be in the Trinidad Basin or the Taiwan Basin. I think that America needs to lead the charge in embracing the technology and getting out there and finding these proven reserves that are out there, bringing them to market, and bringing this price into a reasonable area where we can continue to see the globalization of growth, or the synchronization of global growth that we have experienced for the last 20 years. This whole idea of 1972, MIT did a study, Limits to Growth.
Right.
And 30 years later, guess what? None of their predictions came true. All of these were running out predictions, and the world's coming to an end, have never proven out, and I don't think this time it's going to prove out again.
Greg,
interestingly enough, I actually finally read Limits to Growth in 2000, and it was amazing. I'd heard so many people talk about this book that warned we were going to run out of everything. What they were warning about is running out of things in 2050 to 2070. So I think the jury's still out on whether Limits to Growth.
Well, the
is on
initial.
track.
But hold on there for a second, because I actually have an original copy of that book, and I've read it. And they didn't say we would run out of anything till 2050, but they said that we would have super spikes in prices and that there would be starving people by the late 1980s, early
correct.
1990s.
That's correct. And at 30 years, which would be 2003, we would clearly have depleted a majority of the oil, and there would be huge implications in the economies throughout the world. The problem is, if you believe that we are getting oil from decaying dinosaurs and debris from the forest, then obviously there's only a finite supply. We don't embrace that. We believe that the earth is creating oil as we speak, and that with technological advances and the ability to put human resources together with natural resources and the wonderful capital markets we have here in America, we can get all the oil we need for dozens, if not hundreds of years to come.
All right, we have to leave it there, but we thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Good being with you, Mark.
Appreciate your sharing your thoughts with us. Matt Simmons, CEO of Simmons International. Craig Smith, CEO of Swiss America Trading. We're sticking with the crude theme. Up next, the GOP turns to up the heat on big oil.